right, hey everyone, we're live. I'm T. Krulos.
And I'm Heidi Erickson.
All right. So, how's it going, Heidi?
Oh man, I'm so caffeinated, guy. I'm great. There's no AC in this house, and I'm just jacked up on coffee, and I feel great. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's a crazy week, as always.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't even know. There's a lot going on. Different stuff. It's like a train station in my head.
yeah. I
Um,
heard you was gonna go work at the state fair. They doing pig wrestling down there, or like what are you doing?
I'm gonna find out. So
All right,
that's
great,
uh that's the job perk is you get to wander around state fair, I guess.
nice. I love that.
Um, So it's been hot, very hot,
Yeah,
all over the place. Record breaking heat in Europe.
yeah,
And they smashed a heat record in Great Britain. Um, because it's usually, it's foggy, cloudy, rainy.
yeah. I
It's
lived there for
usually
2 years. I can't imagine it
yeah,
being more than 75 degrees at any point in time.
right. But they got up to like 104 degrees.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's
So
like Phoenix weather. That's insane.
yeah. So
Whoa.
here's how bad the heat has gotten over there. This really amused me a lot, and I'll tell you why I meant. British cinema chain offers redheads free tickets during heat wave because they're concerned about their natural resource, which is redheads, being not being able to handle this heat. And I will tell you that my partner Kate is a redhead,
She is.
and eh, yeah, it's they are their ancestry comes from a climate that is not used to having intense sunlight, so their skin is more sensitive to sunlight, and they can easily get burnt. Kate says that this is a plot that they're actually rounding up all the redheads by offering them free movies, and then they're going
Yeah.
to
It kind of
uh,
sounds like they've confused redheads with vampires a little bit,
well,
which
well,
historically has happened before. So it wouldn't be the first time. And I get it. But does that mean they're all just like chilling watching Thor and everybody else is outside with their blonde hair and the redheads are all like ha 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 suckers and then that's
Well, that's what
counting
they
chilies.
think. They're all
Mm.
like kicking back, being like, "This is awesome. We get a free movie." But then they discover the government plot to eradicate all redheads. Hmm.
Well, that's a terrible idea. There's so many other things that you could be eradicating at any given time. I don't know. I got nothing against gingers. I don't think I've ever really met a ginger that I didn't agree with. I thought they were all pretty all right. Got a lot of freckles. Got to get down with that. And I've never seen anyone that was a redhead be a real vampire, but I guess I wouldn't. Vampires tend to be discreet, don't they? Like nobody's like, I'm a vampire. And you're like, I've never even met you. You just were on the bus. Shut up. I don't know. That sounds great to be a redhead in England if it's 104 degrees then, because that's the kind of place like it's like here in Wisconsin. You would never like rent a house or purchase a house that didn't have a furnace that couldn't like kick it into high gear because it gets freaking cold here. But
Yeah.
where I grew up mostly, it was opposite. Like you could live without a furnace; it was never going to get that cold. But you were not going to try and live in a house without central air conditioning ever. So in England, where it's cold all the time, probably the best they got is just like I don't know, a really big refrigerator and like five redheads all standing around at the same time, and like the beef patties are just melting. It's not about the redheads; they're trying to save the ice cream. That's what I think. I said it.
So, we're gonna get into a big story because it brought up a lot of other stories. So, if you've been listening to the podcast last season, we did an episode where we talked about legends and lore that spun out of wartime,
We did.
and we brought it up because we were talking about Ukraine, um, and they had some contemporary legends like the Beastmaster. Remember this?
Right.
It was supposedly a zookeeper and his trusty tiger had escaped from the zoo, and they were slowly picking off the
I
Russian
love it.
troops. The Russian troops would hear a rustling in the bushes, and they'd be like, "What is that?" And all of a sudden, a tiger leaps through the air and mauls them.
Oh man, if I was a zookeeper, I would just wait to go to war with Russia because I would for sure be training my tigers to just jump out. What's the point of having tigers if you're not going to train them to like jump out and bite people? Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happened to the old Beastmaster? Did you hear anything about
I
it?
haven't heard any new legends.
One hit wonder. That's too bad.
Well, I mean, maybe he's still out there,
I hope
wa-
so.
wandering the countryside, killing Russian troops.
Right?
There was also a story about, I think they call him the Ghost. This was kind of like a Red Baron Ukrainian fighter pilot who had kind of gone rogue and was just flying around destroying, Russian convoys and
Yeah,
airfields and stuff like that.
that's fair. Some people
So
just don't do well with structure. They just gotta they gotta freestyle it the whole time. Yeah, all right. Yeah, they got I mean, like that's a pretty serious war. Anytime you go to war with Russia, that's a pretty serious deal. It makes sense to me that legends are coming out of this already. That makes so
yeah,
much sense.
and we kind of talked about how that's maybe important because if you're facing an intimidating enemy like the Russian army,
Right?
then people are scared and they can find courage in being able to say, well, they have the bigger army, but we've got the Beastmaster out there who's
Right?
much more badass than they are.
Yeah. No, for sure. And like that's happened before many, many times. We were talking earlier about like psychological warfare is a real thing and it's super duper effective. Like we were talking about the Nazi werewolf division, which was a really real thing that really happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we had been discussing, and we had gone into some detail about that on that last show. And we think we actually talked on that show also about the time in the Philippines when the American army convinced everybody who was there that there was a vampire on the loose. It's a particular kind of vampire, an achung, I think it's called. But they didn't just spread stories in bars. They like legit poked holes in people's necks and hung them upside down by their toes and like exsanguinated them so that when people pop back around, they'd be like, oh shit, there's vampires here, obviously. Obviously, this guy did not cut himself while he was shaving. This looks like vampire shit to me. What else was there? I don't know, there's famously
like a psychological terror strategy to
right.
make people think the vampire was on the loose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And like lots of native tribes did that too, where they literally called themselves ghost soldiers because they would sneak in and not just like do your standard war type stuff, but more like guerrilla warfare things where they would just come in and just fuck shit up, turn things inside out, steal the horses, shave people's beards off of them while they were sleeping, just to prove that they could, because that was part of the whole scenario of counting coup, which was a thing that you did to become like a reputable warrior, and it had less to do with killing people than proving that you could sneak right up on your enemy and touch them and they wouldn't even know you were there. But as a result, they got this reputation for literally being like ghosts or demons. And they weren't daft, these kids. They were like, you know what? We totally are. Ooh, run for the hills.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
dude,
I mentioned to you one of my favorite stories. When I was younger, I read a book about Edward Teach, aka Blackbeard the pirate.
right.
And he was very feared on the open seas, and all of these legends about him spread about how he was a demon or had
Yeah.
sold his soul to get demonic powers. And he, of course, leaned into that pretty
Yeah.
heavily. And he would sometimes appear, he would have like these little smoke bombs that he would tie to his long beard. So when he would appear on his ship, all this smoke was encapsulating him. So it looked like he was surrounded by hellfire, and it was
Yeah.
very terrifying.
God.
And I love, he died. He had a fight when he died, and they stabbed him like 12 times or something. They shot him a few times, and he wouldn't die. He just kept like fighting back and killing them. So eventually they cut off his head, and the lore is that they cut off his head and they threw his body into the water, and the body swam around the boat 3 times before it hit the headless body.
Amazing. Wow. Endurance and an entrance. I love that for him. Well, it's the same with like Rasputin, who was inarguably actually in real life a super duper intense guy. But they said when Rasputin died, they stabbed him, they poisoned him, they shot him, they cut off his head, they drowned him. They eventually threw him in a river, and also, I guess, removed his enormous dong and put it in a jar, and it has since been traveling the world. So not a bad exit. You got a good entrance, you got a good exit. That's all you need for a good story. Boom, bada bing.
Go out with a bang, yeah.
So what's this got to do with the news, T?
Yes, so we bring all of this up because anytime there is a mutant in a headline, it draws my attention for sure.
Sure.
Here's the headline on this one. Russia says it's losing because... I just lost the headline. Shoot. Anyway, the headline said that Russia says it's losing because the Ukrainians have bred or in a biolab, they've created a mutant, like, super soldier. And that's why their ass is getting handed to them so badly, is because Ukraine is being unethical making these lab-created soldiers.
Uh-huh. Well, okay, I'd like to point out, because I was thinking about this, and it's obviously a very sensational headline. It also, like, really makes me think of, like, Vladimir Putin just in a room somewhere going, no fear, they have mutants. Like they're cheating. Like, okay, guy, whatever. To be fair, one of the reasons that Ukraine is such a valuable property and why Russia would even bother to fuck with them at all, in case you were wondering why it is Russia is trying so hard to get their hands on Ukraine, is that they have a number of very intense natural resources. They also have the highest concentration of nuclear power plants anywhere in that half of the world. There are so many nuclear power plants in Ukraine. That's a real thing. So, I mean, you got ingredients for mutants, they're just lousy with them. Sunflowers and nuclear power plants, that's what they have in fucking Ukraine. So I guess that's possible. Also, in digging into this, I ran into some very alarming articles that were less of the Daily Mirror variety and more of the popular science variety, in which people were illuminating me to the fact that there are, in fact, already mutant super soldiers, but they're not in Ukraine. Guess who has them?
Us.
It's us. It's the United States of fucking America. We are the leaders in mutant super soldiers. Less so at this point in mutants. So far, they're definitely working on it. They're working on cybernetics. They're working on, like, biological augmentations, which is a great word. But mostly right now, we're just drugging the shit out of them. It's actually already almost caused several international incidents, including a situation where a fighter pilot accidentally bombed a bunch of Canadians.
Oh.
Because the Canadians are such a huge threat. I can see if there were a bunch of Canadians coming at me with, like, I don't know, a bunch, like Poutine, I don't know, whatever weapon they had handy, I might freak out too. But the pilot at the time was so jacked up on dephylephamine, which is an amphetamine, that the army gave to him, because the army gives these pilots, like, on long flights, they'd say, hey, I order you to take meth. So they give these guys meth, and then they put them in a bomber, and then they fly them over Canada, and hijinks ensue. But they can't wait, and there's all kinds of questions coming up about not whether or not we'd be cheating at war, but yeah, whether or not you're cheating at war. That's the big concern, is whether or not it's fair in a theater of war to unleash superhuman soldiers to fight other soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
The problem, I guess.
It's unethical.
It's
apparently.
unethical.
Here's okay. So in this report, this is where it comes from. There was a couple members of the Russian government. They had a press conference, and here's what one of them said about this. And we see the cruelty and barbarity with which the military personnel of Ukraine behave, the crimes that they commit against the civilian population, those monstrous crimes that they commit against prisoners of war, confirm that the system for the control and creation of a cruel murder machine was implemented under the management of the United States. So they're blaming us, actually, which makes sense.
I
And
mean,
they said that these like chemicals that they gave the soldiers in the lab took away their human emotions and turned them into monsters.
yeah, that sounds like math.
Yeah.
That sounds to me like yes. It sounds to me.
Does this look like meth?
No, it looks like pizza.
All right, well, you should enjoy that pizza.
What is it?
Nice.
Is it
Very
pizza?
small.
Thanks, bud. It sounds like they gave him a bunch of drugs. Although we are talking about the American government messing with other people's affairs. So whatever unethical thing happened, I mean, I'm gonna give it a 50-50. I think it's entirely possible. Also, it would be just like us to come up with some crazy mutant super soldier situation and be like, you know what we ought to do? We ought to try this first on some soldiers in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know what else to say about that, but it's interesting that they're blaming mutant soldiers on their inability to turn the tide against Ukraine, who are just, very passionate about defending their homeland.
Right.
But
And
also,
probably also on meth. Like, let's be real.
some of them, yeah. Also, I don't think that saying, hey, our enemy has these superpowered mutants is like a good strategy. Like, people,
Right.
because Ukraine can turn that back around and be like, yeah, we got the X-Men, actually. That's who's on our side, the Ukrainian X-Men.
That's right. That's right, bitch. We have the X-Men.
They all have their own uncanny Ukrainian superpower.
Right.
Where they can, teleport. One of them can teleport. One of them has claws that come out of his hands. One can control the weather. Just that's what their press release should be.
I mean, yeah, like why would you? Because that's that propaganda angle again. Why would you be like, Ukraine has super soldiers? Because wouldn't that just? Okay, here's the thing, and I think that people don't take this for granted, and I think this a lot. I think the people who run our planet, like who are in charge of governments and everything, do not appreciate the nihilistic nature of this generation of people at all. They really, really don't, because they're debating the ethics of combat, about literally whether or not it's fair in a war type situation where they have decided that they don't care if a bunch of, like, they were complaining about the Ukrainians brutally, like being brutal to prisoners of war or whatever.
Yeah.
But they kidnapped a professional American basketball player 4 months ago for having a gram of weed on her and have been keeping her in a fucking metal box ever since. So, first of all, what are you talking about? What are you trying to say here? Second of all, like, most people I think in the world are going to hear like Ukraine has super soldiers and they're not going to think, poor Russia. They're going to be like, dude, dope. Ukraine has super soldiers. Rawr. Team Ukraine.
Plus, if Russia could create super soldiers, they would do it without hesitation.
I've seen movies. I know what the Russians do. Yeah.
They'd have some nuclear ass bear humanoids.
Hell yeah, they would. Hell yeah, they would. They would have Wojtek the soldier bear. They would have dudes that had plane wings for arms, and another guy whose legs were machine guns or bazookas or something. Like, there's no way. Russia would be the first. And when somebody was like, boo, that's not fair, that's unethical, Russia would be like, ha, ha, ha. How is these for ethical? And then just explode them with their mind or whatever. Yeah, it's bullshit, dude. Like, I don't know that there are mutants. It scares me that that is not as ridiculous as it sounds, because it isn't. The bigger likelihood is that it's just a real nasty war between a group of peoples that aren't like not there to show mercy to each other. And like whatever, the Nazis gave their stormtroopers amphetamines also, because it does do exactly that. It raises your hostility and your aggression, and it drastically lowers your ability to empathize with other human beings. It turns you into a fucking murder machine. Wasn't that in the article? Something about fucking murder machines?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it does. So that's the scarier part. Like, that's a scarier headline. Methed out Ukrainian soldiers is a scarier headline to me than Russia claims Ukraine has mutants. Way scarier.
Here's a question from Shane, who's watching the live stream of this.
Hi, Shane.
Wasn't Russia involved in a program to mate human females with bears or apes or something? That's what we were talking about before we went on the air, was that, the Nazis had a lot of really pretty fucking crazy programs.
Yeah, they did.
And I don't know the facts of this, so I'm going to preface that by saying this got interpreted into a lot of pulp comic books and novels and stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they legitimately had a program. Who's the doctor? Mengele? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Where they actually were trying to see if they could create super soldiers by, having a human brain inside of an ape, or crossing humans with animals so they would have more stamina and agility and speed and everything.
I watched a documentary on it, actually, and he legitimately tried to inseminate human females with orangutan sperm, and in the concentration camp specifically, they tried German shepherds because they wanted to create human dog hybrids. Yeah. They thought that was a thing they could do. So like, if the Nazis were doing that way back in the day, there's no way with that. Like, we can splice genes and stuff now, you guys. Mm-hmm. Like, we can do legitimately weird shit. We created, like, it was a couple of years ago, they made a chicken that didn't have a head. It was born without a head. Like, that's the thing that they're trying to do with people too. Make it so you can make a clone of yourself that doesn't have a head. So ostensibly it doesn't have a soul, because at this point in our culture, that's where we think the soul lives. So that in case something happens to your liver or your kidney or your heart or something, you can just go to the freezer and just pop one right out of right next to the popsicles. Just pull one right out. So, I mean, I don't know what science can do. I don't know.
You do a lot of stuff, like put the head of a hammerhead shark on a person,
That'd be so cool. I don't know. Yeah. All I know is that the military industrial complex gets a fuck ton more money than any other anything anywhere. And if that's the kind of stuff that they're doing in medical science right now, fucking knows what the Army's got.
They have so much money that they're like, we will try any crazy idea if we think it can give us a slight advantage. So, you know, there's been a lot of programs that very seriously studied astral projection and telepathy and, the Nazis, again, they did a lot of experimentation with occult symbols and rituals and items. And they're like, hey, why not try it?
Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? Nothing. I mean, I guess maybe.
Maybe we'll open up a portal to hell, but
maybe we might do it. Yeah, but they totally thought. Here's the thing: is that the Nazis, like every other baddie ever, 100% thought that they were the good guys. And I think a lot of people don't take that into account when they think about the world's biggest villains. Yeah. The biggest villain who ever did anything awful, the awfuler it was, the more likely that person thought they were doing what they had to do for the right reasons, for whatever. So they wouldn't have thought they were going to open a gate to hell. They would 100% thought that because they were in the right, because their perspective was the right one, then nothing bad would happen, for sure. But they had more money than they knew what to do with. They stole all the money from everybody else, and then just started throwing shit at the wall. They hired Hugo Boss to make all their costumes. Like there was like, it was just that they did whatever they wanted. Fucking sent missions to Antarctica. Like, do you know how many missions the Nazis sent to Antarctica? So many. At the time, there was no strategic value to having anybody in Antarctica. They were looking for the door to the Middle Earth because they believed that there was a secret, smaller Earth inside of our regular sized Earth. And they thought that the people who lived there had great technologies. They thought maybe that's where Atlantis ended up, was because that is a standing thing because of the Perry Reese map. Oh man, we could talk all day about the Perry Reese map. But yeah, they're all up on Antarctica and everything. There's still, I guess, allegedly tons of abandoned Nazi like bases all over Antarctica and places where they drilled like 2 miles down into the ice sheet. Crazy shit.
Yeah, supposedly they're still there.
Yeah, supposedly there are.
They've just kept the party going under the icy the ice of Antarctica.
Wait, you mean people think there are still Nazis there?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
But yeah, it also there was Nazis were trying to build some sort of UFO. Supposedly, that was the base. Antarctica was where they kept the Reich's UFOs.
I mean, there's a lot of space there.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got stuff to store, Antarctica is the place to put it for sure.
There's a scientific base there, and it has a bar. So a job you can get is bartending in Antarctica.
We're gonna call that Plan B. You and me, we're still gonna get rich off of talking about Bigfoot on the internet. Remember? Focus, buddy, focus. Man. Okay, well that kind of leads us into another thing we were talking about before. Actually, we were talking about the old flat earthers. Gosh, I love those guys.
Flat earthers, they're always coming up with new bad ideas.
Yeah, they're innovative, and I appreciate that about them a lot. So apparently now, I mean, not just now, this is a thing that's been on the radar, as it were, which is funny because radar wouldn't work on a flat earth. Apparently, the earth is no longer flat. Apparently, it's actually shaped like a donut.
Yeah. Well, and you should note that not all the flat earthers believe this. They're splintering into different schools of thought. So some are like, "Are you crazy? The Earth isn't flat. It's shaped like a donut, obviously, because of the way light refracts. It must be going around a donut shape." They got some convoluted explanation as to why it must be donut shaped instead of flat shaped.
Yeah.
Some flat earthers also, there's different. Like some believe it's flat, some believe there's a dome, an invisible dome that covers the Earth. That's a pretty popular theory.
Yeah.
And some other shapes that are a little bit in between being flat and a donut. Some that are kind of hard to describe.
Do you know, T? And I understand that you're talking about a very complicated belief system here, and that there's a lot of different schools of thought, a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different hats that people wear. Why, ultimately, do flat earthers believe they are being lied to about the shape of the earth? Like, what do they think is the goal of the people who are misleading them? Why would the government do that?
Well, I will tell you. They believe that one must follow the money, which is good advice.
It is.
And so they believe that NASA, which has a huge annual budget, that's true. They have a huge budget. They believe that at one point they discovered that they were wrong and that the Earth actually was flat. But rather than admit the awful truth, they thought that they would keep the lie going so they could continue to Photoshop images. They're lazy. They're lazy and greedy, pretty much, is their argument. That they actually don't do science. They sit around creating fake pictures of space, and then they get their, $50 billion or whatever their budget is.
Yeah.
So they're like, don't tell anyone. We got a good racket going here. We're fooling
Right.
everyone. And guess who else is in cahoots with us? Every other space agency on Earth, the entire GPS marketing system,
Yeah.
the
The whole
satellite system.
global inspirational poster industry
Right.
would absolutely be flipped on its head. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, desk globes, everything.
Okay, that's cool.
The money.
That's I sometimes want to just like, I'm not mad at anybody. Like, if that's what you believe, like, whatever, guy, that's what you believe, like, that's fine. I can't help but think that in a world of horrors, because there is some horrifying shit in the world, just terrible. You got the Chicago Bears. I mean, of all the things that you could just, because these people are pissed off. It's not a joke to, it's not even like they're claiming some sort of moral or intellectual superiority about it. The way that a lot of conspiracy theorists do, where they're just like, whatever, wake up, sheeple. It's not even like that. Flat
Oh,
Earth,
no, I think they are, though.
what?
They're kind of aggressive towards people that don't believe, as far as.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying they're so aggressive. It
Yeah.
goes beyond the wake up sheeple thing.
Right.
It goes straight into like frothing at the mouth, bubbling, like whatever, about how this is not a real thing. I was in a corner of the internet that I don't even need to ever go back to, probably, and it wasn't flat earthers. These people believe that we, meaning everyone on Earth, exist inside of a box, and that the Earth itself is box shaped, and we're inside of it.
Box earthers.
Box earthers, and that the reason that the sky is blue is what we're actually seeing is the ocean on the other side, but because it's so far away, we can't tell that it's an ocean. And these people were positively eviscerating each other about the minutia of this insane theory. And I was like, you guys aren't even having any fun. You're putting all your juice into this. You're not even having a good time. You're straight up not having a good time. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Like, at least the Bigfoot people, like, whatever. Like, there's fights that go on there. There's definitely infighting and cliques and whatever. Like, totally. But you get a bunch of Bigfoot people together, generally speaking, they're just going to have a couple of beers and, like, get really intense about their deep, deep love of Bigfoot. They're not going to tear each other to shreds in the internet comment section of a random Facebook post. At least I've never seen that. Have you?
I have.
Have you really?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Actually, there are Bigfoot hunters that hate each other with the passion of 1,000 suns, and I discovered that quickly. It's very surprising, because you would think that they have a very specific niche thing in common. So you think they'd be like, oh, you're into Bigfoot. That's so cool. I am too. That's kind of rare. I mean, if you compare us to the general population. But I think what it is people find, and this is true of like all sorts of other kind of fringe topics, people find this corner and they want to be the expert, the number one.
Right.
And if someone else comes along and kind of steps on their toes, they're like, no, there's not enough room in this town for the two of us. So there are Bigfooters that collaborate and get together, certainly, and there's some really cool Bigfoot conventions where people hang out, but there is a lot of like drama between rival groups that think that they're stealing each other's research or encroaching on their territory, or have a theory that they think is stupid, kind of like the flat earthers,
I'm just picturing them like West Side Story style.
Yeah. It gets, it's kind of close.
And me, I'm like, why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends?
My favorite thing about flat earthers, by the way, is they have a derogatory term for people that believe that the world is not flat,
Is
which
it Steve?
is globe heads. And it's funny because I've heard it used very seriously as like, you think they're going to believe you? You think the globe heads are going to care what you think about this? I'm like, globe? I'm like, oh. It's like, maybe this guy made this up. But then I heard other flat earthers also using it pretty commonly, like.
Wait, do they not know that our heads actually are globe shaped? Do they think our heads are flat too? Because then we can call them flat heads, which I think sounds way more derogatory. Wow.
Globe heads, man.
Man, my favorite kind of people in the whole wide world are people who fail to see the fucking irony. Absolutely.
Oh, man. They're the champions. The champions. Flat earthers are the champions of that, for sure.
Wow. That's good stuff.
Sure.
That's good stuff.
If people haven't seen this, I really recommend a Netflix documentary. It's called Behind the Curve. And it follows... yeah, it's a great title, right? And it takes a look at some of the most prominent people in the modern flat earth movement. And I think my favorite part is there's a group of them who decide they're going to prove that the world is flat by buying a $50,000 laser, what's it called? Positioning device. It's this big fancy device that will measure, if the world is turning on a curve, it'll measure the curvature. So they're really excited because they think they finally got it, and it proves that the world is not flat. And instead of accepting that, they go on to another experiment and another experiment, and all of these experiments prove exactly that the world is on the curve. So
yeah, but it's funny because it sounds like a documentary about kids with dyslexia. Oh man, that's so funny.
But it's got all the flat earth stars are in it. Mark Sargent, he's a prominent
stars.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
My favorite is there's a very popular, or I don't know, I think they've been deplatformed a lot, but there used to be a podcast called Globebusters. And it was a flat earther podcast.
I think that we should hold a segment on T's Weird Week that's just called Convince Me, where we sit down and we just let one of these just give us the pitch just 100%, and we just have to approach it with just absolute journalistic, just total okay. I don't know if you guys listen to this entire podcast, all 5 of you, but at the beginning, T usually will interview somebody. Sometimes I will interview people too, but T's interviews are much better than mine because T has the uncanny ability to have a conversation with anyone about anything without revealing in any way any form of bias. It's amazing. It's like speaking to the Oracle at Delphi or something. And I really feel like you could get these people to open up to you, and I think that we should do it. And then all 5 of our listeners can vote on whether or not they think that's compelling, because this all sounds crazy. But these are, by and large, statistically, people who are super involved in conspiracies tend to be intelligent. They tend to be educated. These are not whenever they show people on the news, it's always some dude with one tooth who what I mean? Looks like he had meth for breakfast or whatever.
Yeah, and fits the narrative. Yeah,
right. But that's not true. They tend to be middle class or upper middle class. They tend to have at least some college education. These are not unintelligent people or people who are necessarily prone to delusion. These are regular people who, at some point, and you and I have talked about this before too, at some point, these people who are trying to be normal, which I guess is kind of living in an illusion anyway, because that's not a real thing. Our society is not super real. So, I mean, maybe that's where it all starts. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they were trying so hard to be normal people, which isn't real anyway, that it was just a matter of time before they started thinking that the world was shaped like a fucking donut. That just goes to show you guys, Be weird as possible, as much as possible, or you're going to end up at a convention.
I think, one thing, I went to a flat earth convention, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And one thing that I saw that was very popular imagery there is the Matrix, and
Sure.
especially Neo getting to choose the red pill or the blue pill. There's
Right.
like shirts with like Neo, and he's got the pills in his hand, and underneath him is a flat Earth.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what appeals to them a lot is they like, oh, I know the horrible truth about all of this, and I'm one of the
Right.
few people, me and the other people in this room, we know this incredible secret about the universe, and all those dumb sheeple walking around are just like not going to see it.
Right.
That's really like what appeals to that mindset.
Yeah, everybody wants to feel special. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to feel special.
Yeah.
Wait, did we just get a message from somebody? I heard a magical tone.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody wants to
Ray
be special.
says eye roll.
You should see Ray's eye roll. It's Olympic level. It's
typical globe head response.
I think Ray's more of a pyramid head, actually. Oh man, yeah, no, everybody does. They all want to, but I mean, like that's the basis of everything, isn't it? Every dogma, every religion, we know what you don't know, and
Yeah.
like the wilder it is, the easier it is to believe because the less like the mainstream thinking it is, and the more special it makes you feel to believe it. Like
Yeah.
that's a whole thing. That's why I have a lot of patience and respect for people who are like, I don't know. I think it's very possible. Like we were talking about Bigfoot. Professor Meldrum, who is passed now, or whatever. But if you listen to some interviews with him, this also is a very rational, reasonable person.
Yeah.
But even with all the mass of evidence that he had, and this is a scientist, this is someone who is an anthropologist and a primatologist, and like this was his field of study. And it was very brave of him to commit the way he did, to just saying, just so you know, this is very possible. And we have enough evidence here where if it was anything else we were thinking about, this would be a foregone conclusion. But I still have never seen a Sasquatch, and neither have you. All I'm suggesting is that it's irresponsible of us as scientists to dismiss the possibility. That was his big thing.
Yeah.
That's a very reasonable response. Absolutely. But if Professor Meldrum had some $50,000 laser that would have proved conclusively whether or not Bigfoot was real, and he had flipped the motherfucker on, and it had gone boop, boop, and don't be dumb, there's no such thing, Professor Meldrum would have been like, well, we've run the definitive test. Apparently I was mistaken. Carry on. Like he wouldn't have been like, that's bullshit. This is a setup by NASA.
Right. Yeah.
It just wouldn't have gone down like that.
Yeah, I feel like science used to be more open-minded in general, where they were like, we don't have the answers. Yeah. We have a theory, and our theory could be wrong, but we're interested in seeing if it is right or wrong.
Right. And like it's not untrue that there are tons of things that we know now to be science that were expressed to the scientific community at all and were for years dismissed because they didn't fit in with what the scientific community already had established as truth. That has happened. Academia, ask anybody who's in it, is very much a mean girls club. You still have to know the right people. You still have to play politics. You still have to get published in the right publications. You still have to be somebody who is good at cocktail parties, because if you're not, it doesn't matter how good your evidence is, there's every chance in the world that nobody will listen to it if it doesn't fit with the paradigm. That's part of the reason that conspiracy theories can happen, is because in the past, things we now know to be true were indeed dismissed. That's entirely true. But like at a certain point, you have to ask yourself why. Like the idea that NASA and all the inspirational poster companies just would rather, I guess, what do they do at NASA then? They think they just sit there and like play video games and create. Yeah, okay.
That all of the employees of NASA, which there's a lot.
Yeah.
That they sit there and they're like, hey, check this out. I like Photoshop this picture of Saturn. And they're like, ha ha, yeah, let's get that into the science magazines.
Okay.
That's great. And then we'll be like, look at all this stuff that we did. Give us some more money.
Yeah. So do you know, did the flat earthers weigh in at all? Because we just sent that real big, real dope telescope out into space.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been seeing some of these crazy, awesome images
Yeah.
that have been
Very
coming
beautiful.
back. Oh, they're gorgeous. Just breathtaking stuff. Like, we live in a magical universe, you guys. Have they weighed in on that at all? Because I'm pretty sure that that telescope costs something in the neighborhood of $30 billion.
There you go. There's the racket.
That's a lot of.
They build so what I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing what they would say is that telescope was a prop and it really cost $100 to make.
Sure.
And then they charged, they're like, oh, hey, we need $3 billion for this big ass telescope we're making. But really it's a prop, and if you see it in space, then that's on their NASA soundstage. They have like a Hollywood soundstage where they can people are like, ooh, look, it's in space, but really it's Hollywood.
Right.
And they believe, I love this. This is it just blows my mind. People are like, what about satellites? Like,
yeah,
that's a thing. We have hundreds of satellites circling the Earth, going
We
around the globe.
Yeah.
Their explanation is that there is a dome that covers the flat Earth, and that the satellites are sent up with big weather balloons attached to them.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of floating along, bobbing along at the top of this dome. But they're not actually going around in a circle. They're just up in the air.
Oh. I mean, that's kind of whimsical and cute.
Big ass helium balloons holding up these satellites.
Cool. You know what? That actually sounds really charming, and I like that. That's kind of cute. I don't hate that at all. I wonder too if in hearing this, and like, it's not unlike what we were talking about with the mutant super soldiers, right? Because mutant super soldiers, that's just a variation on like what the Vikings did when they would consume hallucinogens and convince themselves that they had turned into bears, and then take off all their clothes and run screaming at their enemies, who also 100% believed they had turned into bears. It's just the same shit that we've been doing since always. And the whole flat earth thing is just it's just people who believe the same shit that we believed 1,000 years ago, and don't want to believe that we've progressed at all as a species. I don't know. Yeah, again, just failing to see the irony, and that's a hard place to crawl out of. Once you've gotten to the place where you can't see the irony, it's hard to come back from that. It's really like, what happens when you're a flat earther and you wake up because you wouldn't be that like rabid about your point if there wasn't a part of you that knew how crazy it was. People who 100% believe what they're thinking and saying without doubt do not go on 400 response comment flame wars with other people. They just don't, because they are at the place where they're like, that's weird that you believe that, but you're wrong. And then that's the end. They don't need to debate it. They jerk off, they have a piece of pizza, they go to sleep. That's it. They don't even think about it again, because to them, that other person is blind. So, like, as a flat earther or whatever, whatever, the government's made of lizard people, yada, yada, yada. Ooh, tea. I wonder if that's where the mutant stock came from, was the lizard people. And that's how they're doing it with the adrenochromes. Anyway.
It all ties together.
It all comes together, you guys. At some point when in your life, when that's like your central, not a thing you casually believe, but a thing you like Fox Mulder believe, where you're like chasing UFOs into the woods and like losing jobs and friendships over whether or not the earth is shaped like a goddamn donut. There has to be a moment in your life where like you look in the mirror and you're like, what if this is crazy? Right? And every time that happens, you have to swallow it back down and quick go get into a fight with somebody on the internet so that you can like reestablish the anchor walls around your crazy town. But like, what happens when you realize you spent 15 years trying to convince people the earth was shaped like a donut?
Yeah, I think a lot of those people probably they'll have those doubts, and then they're like, "Wait a minute. Well, let me confirm my bias by going to YouTube and finding
Right,
someone else explain this."
right.
And then they'll like find something and they'll be like, "And here's a sick takedown of NASA where I show you like how they lie and look, here's a picture. You can tell it's Photoshop because there's this little thing in the corner that doesn't look like it belongs there, you know." And then they're like,
Yeah,
"There you go. Now that gave me the confidence boosts that I needed to keep
yeah,
believing in this stuff." I'm sure some people do have a very harsh falling out when they're like,
yeah.
"Wait a minute, this is not
It's got to be like coming out
true."
of a cult or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very similar, I'm
Right.
sure. Where
Really,
you're kind of shaken because your whole reality has,
your whole identity
yeah,
is wrapped up in being this person. You know what I think? I think that, I mean, probably the people who watch our podcast have met us and know us as individuals because, as quality as this content is, our spread is not very large. But anybody who is randomly listening to this web podcast situation would probably think, T and Heidi, if you don't believe any of this shit and you think it's super crazy, why do you spend all your time talking about it and hanging
huh,
out at flat earth conferences and going to UFO conventions? And the
yeah,
truth is, it's because T and I both really badly want to believe. That's the camp that we're in. We know that the universe is weird and that human beings are dumb, which means that there's every possibility that any kind of crazy goddamn thing could be real. And the more of this donut shaped earth adrenochrome lizard people shit is out there, the more possible that the true, actual, really weird things are in there, just sitting like a, just like a Cheeto in the backseat of your car. You don't know it's there.
yeah.
It's been there since 2003, but there's so much other shit back there, you'd never see it. And like, that's why we got to keep asking the questions.
Well, personally,
Why?
I love to hear theories. You know, I don't
Yeah,
necessarily believe them, but I'm certainly interested to hear a crazy theory and to hear why people believe that's true. You know, and some of it's fun, some of it's a little bit frightening,
right.
some of it's in between. But
Yep.
I'm always interested to hear about it at least.
You know what I
So
think too, also, T, and I've never asked you about this. I'm going to ask you now on this podcast in front of half a dozen people right now. I feel like people who are like that, who are in the I want to believe camp, because it's there's in the same way the flat earthers have to wake up every day and have a little crumb of them that knows that that's ludicrous. People like us wake up every day and there's that little crumb in us that's like, what if there are lizard people? Like, what if we're the schmucks? What if that's what's going on? I think that everybody who's like that, it's because they had a moment in their youth where something that they thought was fantastical, not real, would never happen, it was revealed to be true. And you're like, holy shit, I can't believe that's a real thing. And for the rest of your life, you have to look at everything sideways because it's possible that it could be a lot weirder than it looks. So, what was your thing, T? What was it? I know what mine is. What's yours?
that made me think that all this might, or there might be some
Yeah.
truth to this stuff.
How did you get here, T? What was the moment that set you down this strange and twisting road? Tell me. I want to know.
I don't think there was a specific moment. I remember being a teenager and being interested in UFOs. X-Files was popular, you know, and I loved the
Sure.
show. And you know, I read some pretty compelling nonfiction books about UFOs where I was like, it
Sure.
seems like there could be something to some of this. Some of it sounds like it's just something that someone had a bad dream and then
Right,
they
right,
told
right.
the story, but some of it was very compelling too. So I've always been, you know, a little bit interested in that, and I've just always had like a soft spot for weird stories. I saw a UFO at one point.
Really?
Yeah, well, I was working on my book, Monster Hunters. I was out Bigfooting, actually, in Michigan. And me and this guy did not find the Bigfoot, but we saw a UFO that night. And I was like, oh, shit, man. Now it happened to me.
That happens to Bigfooters a lot. They're out in the middle of the woods looking for Bigfoot, and all of a sudden they got a whole new thing to worry about. It's great. I love that for them. All right. Well, I think everybody should ask themselves, and I would like to know of our listeners, I would love it if you would tell us, because you wouldn't be watching this right now on a Wednesday randomly for no reason instead of getting drunk at Summerfest or whatever the hell it is going on. If you too were not a person who had a moment where you were like, oh my God. So I would like to hear your reasons, friends, and if you would send them to us, we'll be happy to talk about them if you let us. But either way, I'd like to know when you all got weird. I'm curious about it. Tell us. Let us know.
Well, here Shane had answered before you said this. I've seen some weird shit in my life. I still look for answers to address some of that.
It's very vague, Shane. Looking for details, textures, sounds, smells.
Well, yeah, people, and if you're listening to the cast version, teaseweirdweek@gmail.com, you can email us there too, and we can maybe explore this more in a future episode, because we are pretty close on time here.
Yeah, we are.
But Ray also said, all the ghost stuff that's happened to me, us. I assume Ray's talking about you.
Yeah, Ray and I were roommates for about 4 years, and some weird shit did go on. That is absolutely true. Some weird shit did go on. Cool. That's a story for another time.
Yeah, and maybe we'll solicit some more listener stories. That would be a fun episode to do some listener stories, I think.
I love that. We'll always talk about whatever you want us to talk about, you guys. Like, yeah. Send us your preferences. We'll do some deep dives.
Why don't we close out with one more story? You posted this, and here's the headline: Colorado Springs man becomes fourth person to push a peanut up Pikes Peak with his nose. It's apparently a challenge that's been done 4 times.
At least 4 times, because not all those people succeeded. Let's be real.
Yes, yeah. And the challenge is you have to actually push a peanut up Pikes Peak. Like I told you, I feel like this was someone one time was like, why don't you go push a peanut up Pikes Peak with your nose, you idiot? And someone was like, all right, I will. How about that?
I will then.
I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, I love the idea. I love the idea that this whole thing originated out of spite. I think that's great. If you guys are not already on Weird Week, which I know you all are, but if you're not, see the article, you'll see the dude is wearing it looks like an athletic cup, like a cod piece on his face. Yeah. I don't know if that's special peanut nose rolling gear.
It is, yeah.
Is it? I thought maybe he had rolled the peanut up Pikes Peak, and as a result, his nose was maybe needed some tender, loving care, and somebody was just like, I don't know, I got this athletic cup, put some ice in that, and just strap it to your face. But he was so proud. You can tell in that picture, so proud of him. I wonder if he trained for it. How do you train for that?
I bet, and it's cute. He has the peanut. He's got kind of like a little box that you would have like an engagement ring in or something. That's where he's storing his famous peanut that made it all the way up. And it sounded like it is kind of rough. He says, I don't feel sore or anything, but I know I lost some weight. My muscles are fine. It was just doing the back and forth that really took it out of me. He says he was a little bit dehydrated. He didn't bring enough water, but he brought...
Peanuts are salty, so...
Yeah, he brought some peanuts to eat as well as Pop-Tarts and bananas.
Ooh, I want to see him push a banana up Pikes Peak with his nose. That'd be a lot harder.
Yeah, a lot harder.
Oh, man. Good for him.
Where's this? Oh, here he is. Bob Salem, 53. So, congratulations to Bob. It took him 7 days to do it.
Holy shit. Holy shit. You know what, too? Your first impulse on hearing this is that there's no way that Bob is married. Like, right? Like in your mind, you're like, there's no way. There's no way Bob is married. But there's no way he spent 7 days pushing a fucking nut up a mountain if there wasn't somebody there to bring him food and snacks. And like, this is not a person who remembers to floss. That guy's got somebody taking care of him. That's all I'm trying to say. I want to meet Mrs. Bob.
I don't think so. I think it was just him, a backpack full of peanuts, Pop-Tarts, and bananas.
Just
not enough water.
Just living the dream. Good on you, Bob. Good job.
And he's like, all right, well, I'll see you in 7 days after I finish pushing this peanut up a mountain.
Unlike the first person who did it, who was like, I'll see you in hell. Spectacular. That's a good exit. I like that for us.
All right. Well, congratulations again to Bob for accomplishing that. And we're going to catch you later. Have a good week. We'll be back next week with more weird news.
Bye, friends.